Well, it is time for declaration number 6. Say it with me. I always have more than enough and plenty left to give. That comes from 2 Corinthians 9:11. I always have more than enough and plenty left to give. You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion, and through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. And if we look back, I think we all can say probably that we've always had more than enough, even though it might not have been what we wanted, but it was what we needed, and we may have had to sacrifice when it came to some stuff. But God always provided somehow, some way, and we're so thankful for that. We have to renew our minds, Dustin says. Another way of saying this is that we have to change the way that we think. You have to unlearn bad habits and learn how God does things. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and prove what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." How are you transformed? Or how am I transformed? Well, by the renewing of our mind. In other words, we change the way that we think. We have to learn to think like God. And how do we do that, you all? We got to get our Bible off the table or out of our book bag or off the shelf, out of our vehicle. We got to open it up. We've got to read it, but not only read it, but read it for understanding and meditate on it and study it. And that word, it will get into our heart. It really will. And it takes time. When we think weak, guess what? God thinks strong. And when we think small, guess what? God thinks big. When we think in lack, God thinks in abundance. If you want to live a transformed life and you want to enjoy the kingdom of God on earth, you have to learn how God does things. That is what we are doing in this book. We're realizing that every word that comes out of our mouths matters. God values words, and words have power. Everything we say is like a seed for our future. The words of our mouth are life or death, and they are steering our lives. Really think about this. Who determines if you see life or death in your own life? It is not all up to God. God is saying it's up to you and what you say. Way too many people talk about lack. They talk more about lack than they do about God's abundance. And hey, I'm guilty of it from time to time as well. How many of us are always talking about not having enough? Don't ever let yourself say things like, every time it looks like we're going to get ahead, something breaks. Something always needs to be fixed. Something's always tearing up. That's life. Maintenance, right? But you are prophesying that right into your own future, and guess what? It'll happen. Start talking like God. God is a too much God, meaning He causes our cups to run over, Psalms 23:5, with more than enough. And as long as you talk about being broke, you're going to remain broke. If you are in a season of lack, you do not have to stay there. Start believing what God says and release your faith by saying, I always have more than enough and plenty left over to give. And today, if you are already walking in more than enough, continue to sow good seed into your future and continue to take the steering wheel of life and declare, I always have more than enough and plenty left over to give. And the giving, that's important. We're supposed to give. This is the will of God. not just to meet your own needs, but to exceed them so that you have leftovers to share with others and give God the credit. Because think about yourself. Has there been times in your own life when maybe you didn't have something, or you didn't have enough money to pay for this or something, and then did God send someone in your life to provide? Well, are you listening to God? Are you helping somebody else? Friends, sometimes you have to be willing to say it before you can see it. So stick with it. God is there to help you, but He can't help you if you're always agreeing with the devil. God needs you to agree with Him and give Him words that He can work with. And when I was reading this little book, I would read it to my husband at night, each little declaration, because he's very wise. And he's a man of few words, but when he does speak, people listen. So I'd read it to him, and of course he'd never say anything. He'd just listen, or I think he was listening. He put the TV on mute, so he was still watching the picture, but I think he was listening. And I'd say, well, what do you think about this one? Do you agree? Do you agree with what he's saying? Do you like it? I wrote down what he said about this declaration on March the 18th. He said this: we all need to be more mindful of what we say. Words do have power. We strive, but it takes time. Most people who are bellyachers want other people to bellyache with them. End of quote. That was his reaction. So I wrote it down. He didn't know I wrote it down, but I did. But I've thought of throughout the years, for years, times when, for this reason or that reason, we didn't have maybe the money for something or whatever, And there was even one Christmas, I remember, where when our son was small and he was wanting something, I can't remember what it was, some kind of a new toy or something for Christmas. And here it was a week or two before Christmas, and I hadn't gotten it. Now, there wasn't no Amazon ordering then, that kind of thing. I didn't even have a credit card. And I had a job, but you pay your bills, and you did, if you had any money left, then great. But well, if you didn't have no money left, and I can remember my sister wanted me to go Christmas shopping with her, and I thought, there ain't no sense in me going, because I can't, and I was too ashamed to say, I can't go, I don't have any money. And, but I didn't want to say that, so I tagged along, even though I tagged along with her, even though I knew that I couldn't buy anything. And she was talking about what she was getting for her daughter, and what he was getting for this one and that one and that one. And I think I'd had my Christmas shopping basically done, all except for a couple of people, and I had no idea what I was going to get them. And back then, people didn't spend a whole lot like they do today. Seems like today it's just, big toys. But I can remember I kind of dropped my pride, and I told her, I said, well, he's wanting this, but, it's not going to happen because I don't have any money. And I will never forget this, and I couldn't believe it. But she gave me a $100 bill. I didn't ask for it, and I wasn't even hinting for it. But that was a lot of money, 40-some years ago or whatever. And I couldn't believe it. So I had enough money to get what he wanted and make him happy. And it made me happy if he was happy. And enough to finish up And I just remember I told her, I said, I'll pay you back. And I remember she said, no, you just pass it on to somebody else sometime. And you know, the Lord's given me opportunities to do that. And I'm just so thankful. And but I'll never forget that. And I know you all have memories of stuff like that in your own life too, where God came through right on time. And that was just something material, but it meant a lot to me, because if you're a mommy, you like to make those kids happy. And Christmas time's such a fun time anyway. Speaking of, I was cold today, and I just got I got one of my Christmas, December, January shirts out because I was cold. It's May the 2nd, Derby Day here in Kentucky, and a lot of stuff going on tonight, this afternoon. Singing benefit at the fire department in another neighboring county, the prom here. Just a lot of stuff going on. And I just pray that the Lord charges his angels to keep us all in all of our ways and goes before us to make our crooked paths straight, as Grandma Lois says. Thanks for being on here, and thanks for listening to this, and I hope that it spoke to you. And you all have a really good weekend. And I will see you later with Bible Declaration number 7. Bye-bye.